Have you ever seen this stamp? Or this stamp? Have you seen this stamp? They are all guilty of being in love. The USPS series of stamps called love stamps. This year marks the 50-year anniversary of the very first love stamp to ever exist. But the original artist wasn't intending to create a stamp phenomenon. He was just making art, and his first version of love would have been way too inappropriate to put on a stamp. Let me set the scene. This is Robert, Indiana. He moved to New York when he was 26, and at that time he went by his birth name, Robert Clark. He was working at Utrecht, a art supply store in Midtown. He was arranging the window display when Ellsworth Kelly, another young artist, came by and started to talk to him about a Matisse postcard. If you're coming to this because you're a stamp freak, you might recognize his 2019 stamp series. Well, Robert and Ellsworth became friends and lovers and partners. And it was Ellsworth who introduced Robert to Countess Slip. It was a former shipping industry warehouse where a bunch of artists had moved in and made it their where they lived and their studio. Robert wrote about his relationship with Ellsworth. Painting life began with Ellsworth. Before him, I was aesthetically at sea. With Ellsworth, my whole life perspective changed. All of a sudden, I was in the 20th century. His new friends and art career also got him a new name, Robert Indiana, because he was Robert and he was from Indiana. Which makes me want to call more people by their first name in the state that they're from. Michael B., California, Taylor, Pennsylvania, Ashton, Iowa, Florida, Florida. Oh my God, he beat me to it. After 10 years together, Robert and Ellsworth were breaking up. And in a postcard to Ellsworth, Robert put the letters F-U on top of C-K. He also made other versions, including L-O-V-E. And he sent that version as a Christmas card to his friends. If you ever got one of those early cards, on the back it might have had this poem, which he originally wrote to go with it. My love is gone to you, like two faces that cannot but turn into each other warm and fierce, whose lips are mated flowers, the long petals growing, knowing, searching for their sons, beloving. The piece stayed nearly the same and was turned into a Christmas card for the Museum of Modern Art. They chose not to include that love poem. He then had an art show, which would just begin the copyright drama that would last for the rest of his life. Lots of things happened in the meantime, but in 1973, Valentine's Day, USPS released the Love Stamp, which was using his design. He was paid for it, and he had given them different color iterations, and they had chosen a red, green, blue. In the actual printing, it ended up being kind of purple, but he did end up using that as a color in the future. It was reissued the next year, and in total, they ended up selling 330 million of that stamp. That's a lot of stamps. And then 9 years later, they were like, releasing a love stamp on Valentine's Day is a good idea. So they started a series where they released a love stamp practically every single year. And this is where we find out that I have personally betrayed Robert Indiana. I am currently wearing the next love stamp as earrings. This is what my betrayal looks like. I bought them at a vintage clothing store, and you may be thinking, Kendra, don't worry, you just bought the love stamp earring that was available to you. But his was also there. There were two options, and I chose this one because it had flowers on it. But my biggest betrayal is not knowing that the entire concept of love stamps started with his original artwork. And over time, this piece became so separate from him because he didn't know much about copyright law, and he probably could have used a lawyer at the beginning. He didn't include the copyright symbol on his first gallery show posters because he felt it made it too commercial. His earliest prints had no direct connection to him. Love becoming massively popular put him in this lifelong legal battle where his work was constantly being stolen, changed, and used. He felt that art was nothing without the artist, and the best way he could connect with his work was by approving what he could and getting photographed with his work as often as possible to remind people that it was him who made it in the first place. This was also during a time when being a sellout was a big insult, especially for artists. So other artists who saw his stuff reprinted everywhere kind of assumed that he had fully sold out, but he wasn't seeing a lot of those financial gains. And as an artist, he moved on to other work, but love stayed static and was put on statues and stamps. I swear that every single story that I talk about somehow comes back to a Second Empire house, and this one does too. But first, I'm gonna rank all the love stamps that came after his. If you loathe my opinion about stamps and don't want to hear about it, you can skip to this time code and just hear the rest of the Robert Indiana story. So this is every single love stamp ever. And this PDF is put together by Portland Stamp Company. They make stamps that aren't postage but can still be used to like spice up your envelope. And now that we know that Robert Indiana started this whole thing, we will be putting him at the very top where no one else can touch him. What I think is really interesting about these stamps is they definitely had a time when they were trying to like mimic that idea of making love its own logo, which I do think was kind of infringing a bit on Robert Indiana's artistic idea there. They're very different images, but they definitely are really focusing on the word love and what that means. The one that I have earrings of, I think they're great. They're going towards the top of the pyramid. I'm just gonna pull out my favorites. They definitely like their birds. Like a lot of these stamps revolve around birds. We got swans, but we've also got some pigeons, doves, whatever you call them. One of my least favorite is definitely the Hershey Kisses collab that they did. I don't think that's appropriate. There are certain things that I think you shouldn't commercialize. A couple years before, they did ones that were sweethearts, and even that somehow seems more okay for me because I don't necessarily associate that with a certain brand. I really do love the more modern collage that was done. It really is actually quite similar to the stacking of the letters love, but it's got a very distinct style that I like. There's also a few that look so 90s and I love that for them. The mail envelope I always think is funny. The angels, that's like such a time. I remember that time. Or it's a cupid. Oh my god, what's the difference between an angel and a cupid? Either way, there is a baby angel who could be a cupid on two of the love stamps that were in the same year. At some point they started making the regular love stamp that you could put on a regular card, and then they also would do a version for bigger mail like wedding invitations, because there's a size that usually is needed for that type of mail. I think the die cut hearts are beautiful. I really do like the one that was the first one that they did multiple designs, but it's like 10 designs and it's got hearts tucked into flowers and doves, and it's really cute. I've definitely also noticed that there was this multiple years in the 2010s where they were definitely really on that heart business. It's so easy to forget when you're in a time period that there is a style that's being focused on. When I look from like 2010 onwards, there is such a distinct style in these stamps. Even the color tones are similar. They all have something pretty notable in common with each other. Oh, and I do love the ones that it's like a bouquet and there's just a couple doves inside. I think those are very funny, and I actually would love to see something love. Should I put a counter for how many times I've said love in this? I think it's a lot. I also really like this year's love stamps. I think that these animals are really cute, the puppy and the kitten, but I also like how they're kind of surreal. Like there's definitely, their dimensions are a little off, and I'm happy to see that. I love animals with off dimensions. I just think they're cute in this, like, you don't really see art like that everywhere. That's a lot of opinions about a lot of love stamps. In 1978, Robert Indiana left New York and moved to a small island in Maine called Vinalhaven. But he was an eccentric artist. He didn't move to any old house. He moved to what had been the Oddfellows Lodge. And this is what it looks like from the outside. He also didn't seem to change much of the interior. He mostly just added on to it. In footage taken in an effort to turn the home into a museum, you can see how little changed and how there's still furniture and murals and canopies on the walls that were from when it was an Oddfellows Lodge. And in an interview, he clearly did see the humor in the Oddfellows motto being friendship, love, and truth. And he is most famous for his love. Well, I loved talking to you about all the love stamps. I also love that a lot of you subscribed recently. It means so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It honestly, I'm like so excited that there are people here to talk to about silly stuff. Okay, bye everyone. I'm Kendra. Bye. Nothing like an intro at the end. Should I put a counter for how many times I've said love in this? I think it's a lot.